On your Tuesday episode of Locked On Raptors, we play the what if game ahead of tonight's NBA draft lottery. It's extremely unlikely the Toronto Raptors will get lucky and move up into the top four. Even less likely they'll get the number one overall pick to draft Victor Wembanyama with, but we get a little hypothetical, a little wishful, and a little forecasty on today's show as we dig into what would happen and what the fallout would be if the Raptors do in fact score some lottery gold tonight. Let's get to it on today's episode. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, May the 16th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 9 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Twitter at WoodleySean. You can follow the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors. And of course, you can join the Locked On Raptors Discord server, which is the link is in the description. It's a super fun place to come hang out, talk about the Raptors offseason, the playoffs, Zelda's Tears of the Kingdom, and also the draft lottery tonight. It's going to be the place to be. If in fact the Raptors do get super duper lucky tonight, you're going to want to be in there to react with all the sickos who are just really, really dreaming big in the Discord today. I actually did a tankathon sim and dropped in a first overall Toronto Raptors screenshot. It was like my 6th try doing it. Crazy. And it just sent the people into a tizzy. So jump on into the Locked On Raptors Discord. It's super fun. Come hang out. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed with Game Time. And on today's show, like I said, we're getting into the what-if game, as, you know, what if the Raptors get super duper lucky tonight and end up with one of Victor Wembanyama or potentially Scoot Henderson with the number 2 pick, Brandon Miller, Ausar Thompson, Amen Thompson, the Thomspon Twins, they're also in the mix there with the 3, 4, 5 picks. You know, it's a very unlikely eventuality here, of course. Just 1% is the Raptors' chance of moving up to get Wemby, and a 4.8% chance of moving up into the lottery. But of course, the Raptors have ethics on their side. They didn't actively tank the season away, much like basically every other team outside of maybe the very injured Indiana Pacers in the lottery. And so if you're going like what the lottery gods might reward, I think the Raptors' behavior down the stretch where they tried to win and still failed, that to me feels like lottery god gold and something that they will be very, very excited to reward tonight. So get hopeful if you want. You know, it's very unlikely. Set your expectations low, but hey, if things happen, boy, things change big time, which is what we're going to dig into on today's show. We'll talk off the top about Wemby, how it would change the course of the Raptors going forward. We'll get in then to Scoot Henderson, what that would mean for Fred VanVleet, what it means for the Raptors as a whole going forward. And then if they end up 3, 4, 5, it's pretty interesting considering the positional and skill overlap and weakness overlap, you'd argue, with some of the guys in that range. And what could that mean for a Pascal Siakam this offseason? Does it make a sort of quick teardown a little bit more likely? We'll get into that. Plus, stick around for the end of the show as I will be announcing the winner of the fan portion of the 6th annual Locked On Raptors Overs, Unders, and Props contest. I've tallied the scores from 41 submissions from the start of the season. We have a winner. We'll get to it at the end of the show and reveal who's going to a game next year on my dime. All right, let's get into the sort of the big one here, right? Victor Wembanyama. We all know. We've heard it. We've seen the hype. We've read the pieces. We've gone through the draft guides. I have been looking at Victor Wembanyama film on YouTube. There's a beautiful collection of just like 3 hours worth of commentary-less arena shots of Victor Wembanyama playing basketball in France. And it's delightful. You just get to watch all the highs and lows of his game for 3 straight hours with like sort of off-timing sound effects from the crowd, sort of reacting delayed to things that happen in the game. It's lovely. You can just watch a ton of Victor Wembanyama out there on YouTube. So go do that if you are not familiar with what a transcendent prospect he really is. He's the type of dude who changes your life forever as a franchise. And look, I'm not a prospect expert. I wouldn't go and sort of like parade around to know exactly what his incredible strengths and weaknesses are, what makes him this sort of transcendent prospect. But every person in the know, everyone who covers this stuff for a living, who spends all the time traveling to France, watching these games in person, watching the film, breaking it all down, talking to people around the game, it's like universal praise for Victor Wembanyama as a prospect. He's 7'4", 7'5". Like, they keep changing his height. He keeps getting taller. He blocks a million shots. He has a handle. He can score around the rim. He can score on the roll. He can be a pick and pop guy for you. Like, he's going to be a defensive player of the year candidate, maybe win it a dozen times. Like, it's a different kind of prospect than you're normally seeing, even with the first overall pick. And the praise is out there. Like, best prospect since LeBron James is just like the standard consensus thought about Victor Wembanyama. It would be absolutely game-changing for the Raptors. And for me, I think the really exciting thing about potentially landing Victor Wembanyama is the way it almost bolsters the idea of the overlapping timelines thing that we've talked about with Scotty Barnes and Pascal Siakam. And can you overlap Siakam's late prime with Scotty's early prime? I think it almost makes it more likely that you can pull off that multi-timeline plan if you do get Victor Wembanyama, who will be on a rookie-level contract for the next 4 years once you draft him. That gives you such an advantage when it comes to team building around him. Obviously, Scotty Barnes still got 2 years left on his rookie-level deal as well. And I think you really start looking, you get Wembanyama, you've got Scotty, you've got Pascal, you've got OG. If you can bring back Fred VanVleet, you're cooking with gas there as far as like your 5 best players, not to mention what you do with Gary Trent Jr., who maybe becomes a more attractive type of piece to bring back as a really nice complementary player on a team that might be ready to go and be pretty good next year, that, you know, is starting from a spot that most rebuilding lottery-bound teams are not, right? Like, they actually have stuff on the roster to support an incoming superstar talent with. You don't often see that. And so I think they could kind of hit the ground running really quick here. I think, you know, 2 things kind of stand out to me as far as what a Wembanyama addition to the team would do for the pending UFAs on the team. With Fred VanVleet, I think it becomes apparent you got to bring that dude back. If Victor Wembanyama is on your team, you don't want to bring in a rookie center who has a lot of utility as a roll man, as a pick and pop guy, without a point guard to make use of those tools to help massage the development along. And I think Fred VanVleet sort of pulling up for threes with Victor Wembanyama on the dive. I mean, that sounds really exciting. We saw the success that he had with Jakob Purtle this year. Wembanyama, you know, obviously Purtle is a far more advanced player in terms of just like knowing the NBA game, physically built, all his stuff. But like Wembanyama's talent is just so bloody tantalizing. It's just something Jakob Purtle can't even sort of contemplate. Like, it's just not stuff he's able to do. And I think it would be truly game-changing for Fred VanVleet to have someone as versatile as Wembanyama. He kind of brings the dive man abilities of a Jakob Purtle along with the sort of pick and pop abilities of a Serge Ibaka of a couple years back. And obviously, it's just in a sort of younger, more projectable, incredible package. And so I think it would be a really, really glove-like fit with Fred kind of running the show. You've obviously got Pascal and Scotty to offer extra playmaking there as well. And you could get pretty fun. I mean, a Fred, OG, Siakam, Barnes, Wembanyama lineup, we saw how bloody successful the Raptors were with that lineup with Jakob Purtle in there. You swap out Wemby, who, while he only shot 28% from 3 in France over last year, it seems as though most people project that his shot is going to be just fine in the NBA. It looks really good. It looks almost alien-like because it's coming off the fingertips of a 7'4" dude who can't have his shot blocked, just physically speaking. And so that's a whole new element that really solves the issue of, oh, this spacing is a little bit janky with Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, Jakob Purtle. You throw Wemby in there, and it's a whole new game. It's like getting the Miles Turner effect, except he's 20 or 18 years old and is going to be on your team forever and might be one of the best players of all time by the time it's all said and done, if everything goes, you know, to the plan and to the book and he stays healthy and all that stuff. Of course, the health caveats with 7'4" dudes are always there. It's just the way physics and anatomy works. But anyway, with Jakob Purtle, this is the fascinating part. If the Raptors do get Wembanyama, is do they bring back Yak? The money's going to be tight, right? Especially if they want to bring back Gary as a shooting complement around a Wembanyama-centered team. You know, it becomes tricky to bring back all 3 of those guys, and maybe Jakob Purtle almost becomes a little superfluous on the team. That's not to say he's not very good and wouldn't be useful. Obviously you could roll lineups out with Wemby at the 4, have Yak be your center. You would have 48 minutes of excellent center play, most likely from day one, with Wembanyama and Purtle out there. Even if Wembanyama is going to take some time to get up to speed, it feels like he's the type of dude this level of prospect usually comes in and is an impact guy right away, just the way he's being branded, the way he's 7'4" and blocks every shot in his vicinity. Like, he's going to have an impact right away. And so you could have those two guys. It's just the financials, right? Do you pay the tax next year for a team that just won 41 games? Maybe it becomes more viable to pay the tax if you have Wembanyama and you're bringing in ridiculous revenue from jersey sales and tickets and season ticket renewals and all this stuff. Like, maybe that makes the tax more amenable to the front office and to the higher ups. But again, the tax is a way more punitive thing now in the NBA with the new CBA coming in. So you got to be careful about it. And I don't think you'd want to lock yourself into the tax in year one of having a transcendent player like Victor Wembanyama. And so I do think what probably happens here is either they try to find a sign and trade for Yak for more of like a shooter or a wing type to sort of balance the roster, or they just let him walk. And that would be seemingly very bad asset management. And on the surface, yeah, you trade Jakob Purtle, or trade for Jakob Purtle, you give up a first round pick in a couple seconds and Kem Birch for 26 games of Yak. That's crazy, but at the same time, you didn't know that you would have the crazy fortune that in this hypothetical you had to go get Wembanyama in the draft. And if that comes to pass, I feel like the sort of asset math of Wembanyama in, Yak and first round pick out the door. The first round pick's a lost cause already. It's a sunk cost. It's a shame it's out the door, but it's gone. I feel like you make your peace with Wembanyama in the door and Yak walking for nothing to go sign somewhere else. And that's that first round pick that you send out, top 6 protected. You'll probably be good enough to avoid handing over a really good pick next year to the Spurs. You're probably handing that pick over because you're not going to be one of the 6 worst teams, that's for sure. And so, yeah, it's a tough bit of asset management. But on the whole, if you told people, 3 years ago, all right, you're going to get lottery luck, hilarious lottery luck in 2 out of 3 years. You're going to get Scotty Barnes 1 year and Victor Wembanyama in the 2 years after that. I feel like you'd be all right just never having a first round pick again for the next 5 years, just because what are you ever going to do that's as great as a Scotty Barnes, Victor Wembanyama 1-2 in 2 drafts out of 3? It's, I think on the whole, you'd make your peace with it. And so I do think Wembanyama coming in would probably spell the end for Yak and the Yak experiment in Toronto, and it would stink, and it would be sort of retroactively a pretty bad-looking trade on paper for the Raptors, but I don't think they'd be any worse off because they have Victor Wembanyama on the team. This is a 1% outcome, so this is not happening, but if it does, that's how I see things kind of progressing. Fred stays, Yak probably leaves, and you go forward with Wembanyama as your starting center, with Christian Koloko as his backup. Maybe you play them together sometimes and are just the biggest team ever to play basketball. We'll see, but that's kind of what I see is what would happen in the event Wemby goes to the Raptors number 1, which again is the most ethical outcome here. And if Adam Silver were fixing things, ethically speaking, this would be how things would go. We'll be back on the other side. We'll dig into Scoot Henderson. What happens if the Raptors end up number 2 and take Scoot, of course, from the G League Ignite? We'll dig into that and talk about what that means for Fred VanVleet. That would probably spell the end for him, right? We'll get to that momentarily. Before we do that, however, got to tell you about our friends over at Game Time, who are wonderful because they make it so you can buy tickets for your favorite sporting events super easy and stress-free. You shouldn't be stressing when you're trying to go to an event, whether it's sports, music, comedy, theater near you. You can get killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. All you got to do is just head over to the Game Time app, download it, and just start perusing around to find those great deals. They got game day deals up to the last minute of the day of the event. You can get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, concerts, comedy, theater, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That is incredible. Get images of your seat before you buy as well. It's just 2 taps, and you get your ticket sent right to your phone. You don't have to dig through your emails and be the person holding up the line doing that. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, we continue on here. Your first listen of the day. Digging into the Eventuality, the thing that's definitely happening tonight, the Raptors moving up in the draft lottery for the second time in 3 years, which would be really cool, great stroke of luck, and probably the end of any sort of tanking talk for the rest of time, because that they've gotten their luck. They're done. They can move forward and not feel like they have to keep on tanking for good players or losing for good players. That's never going to be a carrot that's dangling you want to go and chase anymore. Let's get to Scoot Henderson, shall we? The projected number 2 pick has long been kind of branded as the number 2 guy. It seems like Brandon Miller has kind of challenged him a little bit as far as the number 2 status goes. He's number 2. Brandon Miller is on Kevin O'Connor's board over at The Ringer, for example. But Scoot Henderson would be the pick here for the Raptors. Boy, oh boy, does this team need guard play and not more forward play. And like Scoot Henderson would be, again, much like Victor Wembanyama, who obviously he's like a bit more of a projectable, easy to sort of pencil in as this guy's going to be a perennial all-star type guy. Scoot Henderson has a little bit more in terms of stuff to iron out. The jumper's a little bit off. He's got a mid-range game, but the three-pointer's just not been there. And he's like 6'2". Point guards obviously kind of come with a built-in limitation just on size and all of that. But he's also built like a Mack truck and is incredibly athletic and draws comparisons to Russell Westbrook and Derrick Rose. And so maybe you overcome the lack of shooting just by being a dude and get to the rim whenever the hell you damn well please. And I think if Scoot ends up on the Raptors with the number 2 pick, this probably spells the end for Fred VanVleet. I think there's an argument to say, hey, like, keep Fred to mentor a young point guard coming along, but maybe just as a cost-effective measure, instead of paying Fred his money when you've got Scoot there, you bring him in, you have Scoot and Scotty kind of with Pascal, share the creation tandem load, all of that stuff. Like, it wouldn't be perfect. And I think you run the risk of missing the playoffs next year if Scoot's your sort of starting point guard and you go with him from day one. And you don't want to miss the playoffs next year. You owe a first round pick. So I think there's arguments both ways, but I do think just sort of logically speaking, it probably makes sense if Fred ends up getting signed and traded somewhere else, or maybe just signs into someone's cap space, though there aren't many teams that have that right now. And I think, you probably end up and you're happy with Scoot going forward. I do think, it creates an interesting conversation as it relates to the sort of overall timeline. Like, is Scoot Henderson good enough, like I feel like Wemby is, to double down on that multiple timelines thing again, right? Like, is he someone that you can say, yes, we can now overlap Scoot and Scotty's early prime with Pascal's late prime and OG, whatever he's going to sort of continue to mold himself into? Is that a group of guys you can go forward with and really expect to be a very, good team in the Eastern Conference, maybe contender in a few years' time, all that? Is that something you can bank on? I think it's possible for sure. A lot of it depends on how ready Scoot is for the NBA game, and that's just something I'm not equipped to really know. The three-point shooting for him, that's a concern. And this is a team that doesn't have a lot of three-point shooting. I think if Scoot's back, you probably have to pay Gary to keep his shooting around, especially if Fred's walking in the process. And then maybe you're able to sign and trade Fred for someone who can also shoot. Maybe he just walks into cap space of somewhere else, and you're just like, you take the loss and you use the cap flexibility, or not even cap flexibility, just extra money maneuvering ability, not really to sign outside players, but just to keep your own guys or whatever it might be. I think, obviously you'd prefer Wemby in this situation. It would be such a glove-like fit with the guys they have already on the team. It would be like a natural extension of Vision 6'9", just with 6 more inches added on top. But ultimately, I think, Scoot would be an absolute, it would be an absolute song for the Raptors to end up with him, right? Just so exciting as far as his athletic potential, as far as his ability as a lead guard. And honestly, I think if you're thinking about players to pair with Scotty Barnes, a lead guard who can kind of handle some ball handling duty, ideally shoot, which again, we're not quite sure if Scoot has that just yet. These things develop. This is not, none of these guys are finished products by any means, and to sort of paint them as that would be foolish. But, Scoot profiles potentially is the type of guy who's a wonderful fit next to Scotty if the shot can come along a little bit. If not, then that becomes a bit of a conundrum, right? If Scoot's going to be a 28, 29% three-point shooter like he was with the G League Ignite this year, does that change the, the sort of calculus of the him and Scotty pairing? He was a better catch and shoot guy than he was a pull-up guy. All this, like, these things come along. I would imagine Scoot will find his way to become a three-point shooter. He's super talented, and that's what these guys do. But it's certainly an interesting conundrum, an interesting question. How it relates to Fred VanVleet is fascinating. But ultimately, I think, it would probably spell the end of Fred. That said, I don't think you want to go into next year with Scoot as your only point guard option. I think that probably enhances the need to go find like a very serious, good backup, whether it's you find a way to pry Tyus Jones away from the Grizzlies, or you find a way to get DeLon Wright back from the Wizards. You'd have to go into next season with a very good backup point guard option and someone who can kind of be there to mentor and help shepherd Scoot Henderson along and just kind of be there in the event Scoot can't be up to the duties of running an offense every single possession down the floor. He'd have help. Pascal obviously is really good with the ball in his hands. You could maybe get more heliocentric Pascal out of this. Scotty's going to take, you would assume, another leap when it comes to his creation duties. But if you have a point guards aren't good right away, typically in the NBA. It's very rare that a point guard comes in and is just awesome from day one. It's a very hard position to learn. There's a lot of nuance to it. You got to learn your teammates, all of this. But obviously you figure it out and you'd be very, very happy and thrilled if you moved up and got Scoot Henderson, even if it kind of makes a little bit of a roster conundrum and question as to, do you bring Fred back? Is it worth having him on the team when you also have Scoot Henderson there? And how does the fit work with Scotty Barnes? If both guys are going to struggle with their shots, that's stuff for way down the line. You get Scoot Henderson in the door, you're laughing and you're very, very happy no matter what. On the other side, we're going to get into picks 3 and 4, what happens there, and why I think if that takes place, the two timelines thing becomes a little less tenable, and you might start looking at potentially a Pascal Siakam trade. We'll get to that in just one sec. We'll also announce the winner of the over-unders and props contest from the fan portion of the entries. We'll get to that in just a moment as well. Before we dive on in, however, got to tell you about our good friends over at Prize Picks, who have made daily fantasy sports super fun, super easy, super accessible, and right now is a wonderful time to dive on in. The basketball regular season's long gone. We're into the conference finals. You're just one game a night. Why not play daily fantasy with the single games that are going on each night? I feel like the Nuggets are going to demolish the Lakers, and I would just be like loading up on Nuggets if I could in daily fantasy and having them taking them more against their projections of, is Nikola Jokic going to have 12 assists? More. Is Jamal Murray going to hit 9 threes? More. I know the Lakers are a good defensive team, but I kind of think they're going to get demolished by the Nuggets. Either way, if you, like me, are high on the Nuggets and want to go play daily fantasy sports with their players, you can do that over at Prize Picks. You just pick 2 to 6 players on a given entry, and you can win up to 25 times your money. And again, it's just you against the available projections. You say more or less than the projected stat. If you get it right, then you're in the money. That's awesome. And they also offer not just NBA basketball, but all the sports under the sun, men's, women's, North American, overseas. It's all in there. Please go check them out at prizepicks.com and sign up and play daily fantasy sports. You can also download the Prize Picks app. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's super duper easy. And first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. Just means if you deposit $100, $100 will appear in your account alongside it. What a wonderful thing. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100 with Prize Picks. All right, we are rounding out the show here, taking a look at what would happen if the Raptors moved up into the top 4 of the draft. Not quite the Wemby or the Scoot zone in 1-2, but you get 3-4, and there's essentially 3 guys who are kind of projected in that range. It's Brandon Miller from Alabama, and then the Thompson twins, Ausar and Amen, who played for Overtime Elite, if I'm not mistaken, in their careers, in their college career, no, not college careers, pre-NBA careers. There you go. The league's changing up this stuff, and it's hurt my brain. So you've got Amen Thompson is sort of projected as more of like a combo guard type. He's 6'7". Ausar Thompson, more of a wing type. He's also 6'7", identical twins, etc. And I think, with these guys, it's a really fascinating conundrum the Raptors would find. I've used that word a lot today, conundrum. I'm going to retire that word for a hot second. But it would create, I think, a pretty interesting philosophical question almost for the Raptors as to what you do if you get 3 or 4 in the draft. You probably take Miller if he's there, even though of course there's the sort of very unclear, very unresolved stuff with him and the Alabama and the murder investigation that he's tangentially tied to. Obviously plenty of investigations going on there, but I don't totally feel like amazing about how that's all been handled with Alabama. I think across the board, the sort of concern with how that whole thing has been handled is pretty real. But as far as just like a basketball player, Brandon Miller fits what the Raptors would need more than I think Thompson, just because he's like already a 3-point shooter. Shot like 39% in college, all of that. Wing score, all that. And I think, either way, you get 3, 4, or 5. None of these guys are projected as good as Wembanyama or even Scoot, or maybe Scoot's kind of closer to their tier than Wemby. Wemby might kind of be on his own here. But if you get one of those 3 guys, Miller, Amen, or Ausar, do the Raptors have enough juice to then do the 2 timelines thing? Like, do you believe enough in Miller or Thompson becoming really good very quickly to help enhance that overlapping of Siakam's late prime with the early primes of Scotty, and then, of course, one of whoever you could draft at 3 or 4? And the answer there might be no. Like, it might take some time for these guys, especially the Thomspon twins. Like, they don't have shots that really, nothing to write home about right now. Like, their jump shots are off. They're wayward, and that's the stuff they got to add to really kind of take the next step as players, as prospects, as projectable future stars. And so, do you then sort of say, you know what, we get one of these really blue chip prospects. They're maybe a little bit further away than Wemby or Scoot from being impact players from day one. Does this maybe make trading Pascal Siakam more of a thing we got to look at this summer as sort of a way to initiate what in this case would be a really quick rebuild on the fly? I don't think, whoever, if you stay at 13, if you say you get Jordan Hawkins at 13 or something like that's just who Tankathon has in there right now, but there's Keontae George, Cason Wallace, et cetera, all the guys we talked about last week with Raphael. If you go listen to that show, go do it every day, or you've already listened because they're the best. But if you get like a Hawkins or someone at 13, you're probably not looking at them as like a blue chipper who's changing your life to make that sort of younger timeline a surefire no-brainer. This is how you build the next great version of the team. Whereas if you get Miller, Thompson, maybe that does become a thing you can, believe in. If you have Barnes and Miller or Thompson 2, 3, 4 years down the line, maybe that is your contending team. That's your very good sort of perennial playoff team and all of that you're striving for here. And maybe Pascal Siakam doesn't quite fit into that. And maybe they're not quite good enough before that eventuality 3, 4, 5 years from now, where Pascal being on the team makes a lot of sense. And so maybe you have that super high talent, the sort of, 2 guys drafted in the top 3 or 4 from the 2 of the past 3 drafts. You have OG, you have Precious, you kind of go in, you have Koloko, and you go in and say, you know what, this is the time for a very quick teardown. We move on from Pascal. Maybe we don't bring back Fred. Maybe we sign and trade him somewhere. Maybe you do bring back Fred as sort of the shepherd for the younger team, although I know lots of people think he doesn't like to be a mentor. I think that's wrong, but that's fine. And then maybe the Siakam deal is one. Maybe you call up the Blazers or something and say, hey, that Shaden Sharp and Fernie Simons thing everyone's talking about, is there something there? And so that I think does open up a very real possibility that Pascal gets moved, just because the timeline becomes a little bit harder to manage, a little bit harder to project forward here. Whereas I don't think you can bank on Scotty plus 13 pick being the sort of core you can definitely build around. And I think Pascal becomes essential to that team being good in a way that maybe he's not if you have one of those higher blue chipper guys. I know this is kind of convoluted thinking, but it's weird. We're talking hypotheticals here. You have to get a little convoluted. Either way, it would be a good thing for the Raptors to move up. It might spell the end of Pascal just because of the positional overlap, the lack of shooting, and just maybe the need to kind of reassemble the roster. And again, if you can flip Pascal, again, the Blazers kind of stand out. If you can get Simons and Sharp or Simons plus whatever and have that shooting injection along with Scotty, along with OG, maybe that makes letting Fred walk a little more palatable as well. You bring back Yak, there's a way to retool this team very quickly on the fly around like a Scotty plus whoever they draft 3 or 4 plus OG sort of core. It'd be a massive overhaul over the course of just one summer. It might necessitate letting a guy or 2 walk for nothing, which would drive people crazy, but maybe that's just, you got to cut your losses and, accept when things just kind of have to veer in a different direction. So that's where I think we're at there. Again, all these very unlikely. 1% chance at the number 1 overall pick, 4.8% chance at a top 4 pick. Hopefully the lottery gods are smiling down today. We shall see, but it's fascinating stuff. And the Raptors stand to have their lives very much changed and their off-season plans massively altered if, in fact, they end up moving up in the lottery. Not to mention, what it could mean for the coach. If they get Wemby, how does that change what their coaching search looks like? Does it change who wants the job? Do, the dignitaries of coaching royalty start lining up to coach the Raptors? Who's to say? By the way, Monty Williams, that report yesterday, I like it. Go check out Monty Williams. Give him a long look. He's the kind of guy who the Raptors could badly use right now just to kind of set the culture and all that. That's for another day. But that's where I'm at. Lots of change will happen if the Raptors move up in the lottery tonight. Very unlikely. Probably not happening. We're probably in the same spot we are today tomorrow. But if not, then boy, oh boy, things get massively interesting here on the show. Speaking of interesting, let's hand out the winner of this year's Locked On Raptors over-unders and props contest. And it was a very, very close, heated battle. We had 8 people in very close contention here. So you remember yesterday from the show where we dug into the final results for myself, Vivek, and Sahal. Vivek won with 10 points out of a possible 18 on the over-under selections. Very, very close in the fan voting, and only a couple of people got better than 10 points. So rough go for everybody. Everyone should be ashamed, I suppose. The winning score, 12 out of 18. I'll run through those who got 11 out of 18 right now, just so you know you were in the running but didn't quite get it. I like to break some hearts here. 6 people got 11 points out of 18. We got Craig Regnier, excuse me if I'm spelling that wrong, or saying that wrong. Conla Houlihan, that is. Lawrence Smith, Andrew Fortnum, Lachlan Cubbin, Jeff Schofield. All of them finished with 11 out of 18 points. Well done. Congratulations. You beat everyone on the podcast yesterday, which is something to be happy about and proud of. 2 people ended up with 12 points out of 18 at the end of the day when I tallied up all the scores of all the picks from before the season. And it came down to a very close tiebreaker. Of course, the tiebreaker was how many points will Terrence Ross score for the for the Orlando Magic, Freudian slip, for the Orlando Magic in 2022-23. He scored 334 points. The tiebreaker, very, very close. Not to the number itself, but in terms of the two numbers being close to one another, they were very close. Khalil Jamal and Jeffrey Richardson are the 2 people who got 12 out of 18, just to amp up the suspense here a little bit. And it came down to the tiebreaker. One person guessed 815 points for Terrence Ross. The other guessed 850, meaning the 815 is the winning tiebreaker number, which means Jeffrey Richardson is the winner of the Locked On Raptors over-unders contest for 2022-23. Congratulations, Jeffrey. You are going to a game next season on my dime. Very excited to get you there. It should be awesome. Wait for an email. I'll reach out. But congratulations. You are the winner. You should be very proud. 12 points out of 18, and the closest tiebreaker answer. Very, very well done. Thanks again to everybody who participated. We had 41 people submit entries, and we will be doing this again next year for sure. It was super fun to play along with everybody. So get your picks ready and get your over-unders prepared going into next year, as we will bring back this contest when the new season comes around. Hopefully, we'll have over-unders about Victor Wembanyama and how many times he'll dunk on someone after a offensive rebound from a bricked 3, which will be a lot. He does that a lot if you watch the film. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Congratulations again to Jeffrey for winning the over-unders contest. Very excited. Again, I'll be in touch about your tickets, and we'll figure out a game for next year and all that once the schedule drops, etc., etc. And thanks again to everyone who participated. We'll be back again tomorrow. We'll react very loudly if, in fact, the Raptors do move up tonight. If not, we will maybe do a little mailbag episode or something like that to get your middle of the week, your hump day sorted out. And with that, thank you so much for tuning in. Go make your next listen Locked On Leafs, as the Buds are breaking down media day yesterday as the Leafs, the Buds, I guess they are Buds, Mike and Dave. Mike and Dave are breaking down the Buds media sessions yesterday. Kyle Dubas, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, etc., etc. End of the season, locker cleanout, always interesting in Toronto. So go check out Locked On Leafs as they have the full breakdown of all that as the Buds continue to disappoint perennially. With that, thank you very much. Thanks so much for hanging. We'll talk to you on Wednesday with another episode of Locked On Raptors. Bye-bye.